afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. So today we've got Alejandra Otero from GENEO Academy and Dr. Stephen Mallon with us on GENEOUSChats. So guys, just as we were talking a minute ago about today, we're really kind of looking at around the teaching and learning context within the pandemic and what's happened this year. And I understand that you guys have both been involved in it in kind of different ends. So Alejandra, you as a kind of learner online, as the online experience, and also talking to institutions about their responses. And Steve about actually being on the ground teaching and working with teachers in helping them to meet the challenges of this year. So can we start with you, Steve, just to ask you about, in general, what has been your kind of what have you found this year as a teacher on the ground?
Well, how have I found this year? I think it's been a tough year for everyone in education, and it's good to, a lot of focus is on students, and rightly so, but it's good to spend a little time thinking about the impact on teachers. And I think it has been genuinely tough, because what they were thrown into in a very deep end of a very deep pool wasn't remote learning or hybrid learning. Initially, it was just emergency distance learning because schools had to transfer to an emergency format just to keep things going. And some teachers were better prepared for that than others. And in my experience, very few of them were properly trained or supported in that. And then we got to September and suddenly everyone is talking about hybrid learning. So the time of the emergency had passed. And then we're suddenly in this hybrid thing where schools are trying desperately to provide an on-campus experience for some students, while the majority of students are tuning in online. And so there's an entirely new pedagogy that teachers have had to embrace, teaching two communities in one classroom, virtual and in presence. And for me personally, it was a lot easier when I was organizing everything for everybody else than it is being a teacher on the ground, because on the ground you are impacted by the technology, the equipment, the fact that schools aren't really thinking about teachers when they put the equipment in place. They're just saying, oh, we need this, we need that, we need the next thing. And teachers are just jumping from one task to another without really having enough assistance, I think, to deliver well and to feel comfortable. And so I've been teaching now for 9 weeks in this new thing, and I'm only now starting to feel comfortable with what I'm doing. And I mean, that's someone who's been teaching for nearly 40 years. So for me, it's been tough.
Yeah. Okay. And from what Steve said, Alejandra, is that resonate with you at all? I mean, because you've got the other perspective. What was the course you were doing online this year?
Yes, I started. Actually, it was in March. It was supposed to start in March in a non-ground format, and it was an executive program in sales management at ESIC, right, in Madrid. So normally I would be traveling all of the time, and because of that program, which was on ground during the weekend, I said, you know what, I'm going to stay in Madrid. That's it. We're changing a bit the rhythm. And it was supposed to start like the second week of March. And actually, Spain went into lockdown few days before that. So the program actually didn't start as planned because they were not ready as any other school to just jump on an online format from one day to the other. So what ended up happening was that we waited for 2 months until we got an answer saying that, okay, your program is going, but it's going to be on an online basis. Take it or leave it. You can feel free to not take it or to stay. And then what happened is that we stayed there for until November. So it was also pushed, and it was a tough experience, I must say, but a very rewarding one. And I do agree with Steve saying that they were just not prepared, not as a school, but as the professors just trying their best. But in some cases, as they were trying to be there for every single one, they were just impacting the rest of the class. Or in other cases, they were just not familiar with the technology. So the classes were being extended, or they were focusing on the theory, which is what they would feel comfortable with a format for the big part of the class. And then at the very end, they would just go very quickly with their own experience, which in my opinion was the most interesting part to be shared. So I think it's a matter of different skills that they hadn't acquired yet, and they just had to jump in. But in the end, at least from my perspective, it was a positive experience. I'm just not sure I would hop on that again with that format until things are not properly done. Again, not for one school, not for one professor, but as a whole.
There's a common thread here in from both angles here, which was and it tends to come down to it, doesn't it? It tends to come down to the professors, because that's the front line. It's what your experience is in the classroom, and you can make various assumptions about the organizational readiness behind it, but in the end, if the professor in front of you appears in control, you get the perception of control from the organization. So there's an awful lot of pressure on professors who quite typically in most areas of the world in universities don't have the pedagogical support generally anyway. It's not the same as high school and primary school where it's like, highly trained in pedagogy. It's more professional relevance, your professional, especially in business schools and things like that. In you go, and good luck. So, it could be said that perhaps this year has laid that very, very open, that it's very clear that we need to support teachers a little better. What I'm wondering is, because the teachers are the kind of front line, and I noticed that, Steve, in something that was, I think you'd written or was an article in which you appeared, I think you were quoted as saying that you were talking about managing expectations this year, and just kind of like, let's just be conscious of what we can and can't do, and let's just do the best we can. But in terms of an experience as a learner and as a teacher, how do you think expectations can actually be managed? Because in the end, the students are paying for this and expecting, we have to understand that the expectations are relative to what you've paid as well. So how does that work in the classroom? I mean, so as a learner and as a teacher, how do you manage those expectations and have those conversations about the situation?
There's a lot to unpack there. I think from my point of view, the expectations of the students haven't really changed. In fact, they're more complex because the students who are online, they want to feel that they are part of it, and they're expecting you as the teacher to do everything you can to give them the best possible experience and make them feel part of the school community, albeit they're in a completely different place. And then the on-campus students, they want to have as close to an on-campus experience. They want to get to know you. They want to have a sense of who you are, and have a dialogue with you. Whilst at the same time, they are surrounded by all of this technology, which may or may not choose to work on any given evening. Like last night I was teaching, and the sound stopped working, the microphone stopped working, and so you have to go through the whole rigmarole of getting that rebooted, or the Wi-Fi doesn't work, and it ends up being a bad experience for everyone, and you as the teacher are left feeling really pretty rubbish because there are so many elements that you can't control, whereas normally in a classroom it's like a theater. You can control everything, you know exactly what you're doing. And teachers control that environment. And I think for me, one of the big features has been that a loss of control, which makes it less enjoyable to teach, which must then translate, I would imagine, to the students. If I'm not enjoying it as much, if I'm constantly worried about if the technology is going to work or not, then I guess students will pick that up. So from the teacher side, you're doing your best to try and give these two separate communities within the one community the best possible experience that you can. But it is a tough thing to manage, I think. but the expectations are still high. Students are paying the same amount of money. I'm not aware of any business schools that have reduced their prices. So they still want to have a good experience.
Yeah, I fully agree with Steve. And for me, it was really a different experience to live as a student. Going back since 2014 was my last class as such. So that was interesting because I was, on the one hand, experiencing it myself as a student, and on the other hand, speaking with different institutions, clients of NEO, asking themselves those same questions, right? So we got to see different things. So question about pricing, yes, some of the schools were actually saying, should we take the price down? Should we give some some additional, not in terms of monetary rewards, but should we give something else to the students as they're missing the part related to the experience? Or should we do this or that for our professors, or this or that for our staff? How do we show that we're there, etc., etc.? So I was involved in those conversations. And I think going back to expectations management, as you were mentioning before, Mark, one thing I learned from this experience is you just can't please them all. It's impossible, absolutely impossible. So I think it's really important to get that in the equation, because no matter how hard you try, how much you do positive things, how much you actually pledge for a better good, for having a something better for tomorrow. I saw a school where the C-level staff just reduce their own salaries to give back to students. I saw others giving some additional sessions for the students for free, etc., etc. There's always going to be someone complaining, no matter what, whether it's on the staff side, on the professor side, on the student side. And I fully understand that. And I think it was really important, because I was also frustrated with some of the parts. But in the end, I think it's also a personal challenge to understand that, well, I might be frustrated, but I'm not the only one. Everyone has their own issues, and this just happened. And going back to what Steve said, there are things that we can't control. And this is also a big learning for me this year, is that we just need to let it go and understand that we can focus on whatever is on our control. So if I had these expectations and I just can't meet them, not because of me, not because of the professor, but because of the whole context, then maybe let's take my expectations a bit down this time, just for my better sake and for the sake of everyone else. And together as a class, we would be able to actually bring a little bit of the general expectations level by turning down the individual ones and just making it a balance from one side to the other. And same for the institutions. You can do whatever you want and you can try whatever you want. Once again, if it doesn't work, that's fine. At least you tried everything from your end, and we're all learning from this experience. Otherwise, I mean, none of us were planning this, and we go back to what is unplanned, what needs to be tried to be planned, and what just is planned and goes out of plan.